he was offered a last meal. Allen requested buffalo meat, fried bread, a bucket of KFC chicken, sugar-free pecan pie, sugar-free walnut ice cream, and whole milk. On January 17, 2006, Clarence Ray Allen was executed by lethal injection at San Quentin State Prison, California. During the execution, an additional dose of lethal potassium was required to stop his heart. Allen was declared dead at 12:38 a.m., and before his death, his final words were, "Hoka, hey, it's a good day to die. Thank you all. I love you all. Goodbye." John B. Nixon. State, Mississippi. On January 2, 1985, John B. Nixon Sr. was convicted of the contract killing of 45-year-old Virginia Tucker. Nixon, accompanied by his son John Nixon Jr. and Gilbert Jimenez, broke into the Tucker home. Nixon pulled out a .22 caliber pistol and said, "I've got something for you." Thomas Tucker, who had married Virginia just 6 months earlier, quickly realized that the men had been hired by his wife's ex-husband. Thomas offered money to save their lives, but Nixon responded, "That's not what I'm after." The deal is already done. Nixon shot Thomas, who managed to escape despite being hit twice. Nixon then took Jimenez's gun and shot Virginia in the head while Jimenez held her down. Nixon and his accomplices fled the scene. Thomas survived and was able to identify Nixon. The man who hired the killers, Elster Joseph Pontieu, was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison. Nixon's sons, Henry Leon Nixon and John B. Nixon Jr., were convicted on lesser charges related to the plot. Jimenez, who testified against the others, received a 20-year sentence. Nixon was sentenced to death on March 26, 1986, and spent over 19 years on death row. During this time, he attempted to appeal his conviction, but his efforts were unsuccessful. The day before his execution, he was offered a last meal. Nixon requested a well-done T-bone steak, buttered asparagus, a baked potato with sour cream, peach pie, vanilla ice cream, and sweet tea. On December 14, 2005, at 6:25 p.m., John B. Nixon Sr. was executed by lethal injection at the Mississippi State Penitentiary in Parchman, Mississippi. He was the first person executed in Mississippi in 2005 and the 7th in the state since 1976. When asked for his final words, he said, "I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for the world. I'm sorry for myself. And I'm sorry for the family. I did not kill Virginia Tucker. I know in my heart, and it pains me to admit it, that it was my son and a Spanish friend, and another man from Jackson." John B. Nixon Sr. was pronounced dead at 6:35 p.m. Carl Wayne Bunchen. State, Texas. On June 27, 1990, Carl Wayne Bunchen shot and killed Officer James Irby in Houston, Texas. At the time, Bunchen was on parole after serving time for sexually assaulting a minor. He was a passenger in a vehicle that Officer Irby pulled over for a routine traffic stop. After a brief conversation, Bunchen exited the car and, without warning, shot Irby in the head. As the officer fell to the ground, Bunchen fired again, striking him in the back. After killing Irby, he continued shooting at bystanders while attempting to steal a car before being arrested. In 1991, a jury sentenced him to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned his sentence in 2009, but in 2012, a new trial reinstated his death sentence. In 2021, the U.S. Supreme Court denied his final appeal, clearing the way for his execution. A day before his execution, he was offered a last meal, but it was not specified what he requested. On April 21, 2022, at the age of 78, Bunchen was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas, becoming the oldest person ever executed in the state. Before his death, Bunchen addressed Officer Irby's family. "I want the Irby family to know one thing. I regret what I did. I pray to God that they get closure for having their father killed and Mrs. Irby's husband taken away. To all my friends who have stood by me all these years, I'm not going to say goodbye, just see you later. I'm ready to go to heaven, Warden." Outside the prison, dozens of motorcyclists, including Houston police officers and retired members of motorcycle clubs, revved their engines at the time of the execution. Witnesses described the noise as disturbing, with some calling it disrespectful and disgusting. Bunchen was pronounced dead at 6:39 p.m. At the time of his execution, he had spent 31 years on death row. Bigler Stouffer II. State, Oklahoma. Bigler Stouffer II was executed for the 1985 murder of Linda Reeves. Throughout his trial, Stouffer maintained his innocence, claiming that Reeves was already dead when he arrived at the house, while her companion, Doug Ivins, had been severely wounded. However, prosecutors argued that Stouffer killed Reeves and shot Ivins in an attempt to gain access to a $2 million life insurance policy while being involved with Ivins' ex-wife. In 2003, Stouffer was sentenced to death after his original sentence was overturned. Despite multiple legal efforts to halt his execution, arguing that lethal injection was inhumane, the Supreme Court denied his appeal shortly before the execution. After 19 years of appeals, Stouffer was finally executed in 2022. A day before his execution, he was offered a last meal. Stouffer requested a chicken sandwich, 2 slices of bread, French fries, broccoli, mixed fruit, 2 cookies, a fruit drink, and a bottle of water. On December 9, 2021 at 10 a.m., Stouffer was administered the lethal injection. He was declared unconscious at 10:07 a.m. and pronounced dead at 10:16 a.m., with no reported complications. His last words were, "My request is that my Father forgive them. Thank you." Stouffer continued to assert his innocence in Linda Reeves' murder and prayed for God to forgive those carrying out his execution. In an interview prior to his execution, Stouffer stated that he believed life without parole was worse than death, and that he was grateful and at peace with his clemency being denied. At 79 years and 2 months old, Stouffer became the oldest person ever executed in Oklahoma, and the second oldest in the U.S., following Walter Moody, who was convicted of killing a federal judge in 1989. Additionally, Stouffer was the second inmate executed in Oklahoma after the state resumed executions in October 2021. Walter Leroy Moody Jr., State, Alabama. On December 16, 1989, federal judge Robert Smith Vance was at his home in Mountain Brook, Alabama, when he opened a package containing a homemade. The explosion instantly ended his life and severely injured his wife, Helen. 2 days later, civil rights attorney Robert E. Robinson was killed in a similar explosion at his office in Savannah, Georgia. Authorities launched an extensive investigation that led to the capture of Walter Leroy Moody Jr. and his wife, Susan McBride, on July 13, 1990. McBride was released on bail and testified against Moody in exchange for immunity. Prosecutors determined that Moody had mailed multiple, including one to the 11th Circuit Court headquarters in Atlanta and another to the NAACP office in Jacksonville, Florida, in an attempt to divert attention from his responsibility in Judge Vance's murder. In a federal trial, Moody was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 7 life terms. Later, an Alabama state court sentenced him to death for the murder of Judge Vance, a sentence handed down on February 13, 1997. A day before his execution, he was offered a last meal. Moody requested a Philly cheesesteak, a Dr. Pepper, and M&Ms. On April 19, 2018, Moody was executed by lethal injection at Holman Prison in Alabama. He was pronounced dead at 8:42 p.m. When asked for his final words, Moody declined to make a statement. At 83 years and 26 days old, he became the oldest prisoner executed in the United States since the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1976.